Hi everyone, this is Luke Johnson, and Sophie Le Corre and I are going to be talking about Aldous Huxley's Brave New World today. How are you, Sophie?
Fine, thank you.
I'm very excited to pick up the second part of our discussion. Hopefully we will cover, I have a bunch of issues that I want to talk about. I think there's a bunch of issues that you want to talk about. Judging on our previous installment, I would guesstimate that we'll probably get through 4, 5, 6 chapters, if that. But it should be an exciting discussion. Do you want to say anything before we jump into it?
No, I would like to jump into it.
All right, right. Okay, let's do it. So I believe we last time we were talking about we got like halfway through our discussion of chapter 2, and we were talking about how this tour group was looking at the that the DHC was leading was looking at the infant hatchery, and he was talking about the virtues of social conditioning and moral education, and he explains to us about how babies are shown books and flowers, and then these really violent explosions are paired associated with it, so that they develop a personal revulsion to those things, and they become better producers and consumers and fit into the hierarchical structure of the world system that is going on in Brave New World. And there's also this, we learn about this technique of hypnopedia where they do some sleep learning as well, kind of brainwash them before they can even think for themselves. And it's very effective at making people ravenous consumers. And something we were talking about last time was, whether or not that was going on within our society in some way, how it manifested itself. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. I think I've got some things that I have lined up, but I don't know. Maybe I'll give Sophie the first stab at it. Would you like to say anything about this?
What I wanted to say is that Aldous Huxley, he really anticipated the consumption society, and now we can say that through advertisement and communication strategies, you have something not as strong as in a Brave New World, but you have something similar.
So we think, right? So we think.
Yes, the similar thing is that people are socially conditioned to consume.
Right, and this raises a very interesting question. What you were talking about is like, well, we don't have it as bad as the people in Brave New World, right? But here's an interesting question. If there is this conditioning going on, would we be even able to recognize that we were in a Brave New World scenario, and what would it take to break out of it?
The issue is that our current economic system is really it's really a system. So if you want to live in a to have food and to be able to take care of yourself, you have to be part of this system, or it is very hard. There are a few people who don't have money, but it's really rare. So who do not need a job or help from the state, or it's really rare that people can live in outside of the system.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult, and I think that's going to be something that we'll talk about more and more as time goes on. I think it's a great point to bring up. Would you like to say anything else before I raise one of my first points?
No, I wanted to say that right now we really are producer consumers, and I sent to you an article about Anna Arendt and Karl Polanyi, and
I apologize. I haven't gotten a chance to look at it yet.
but,
So maybe you could enlighten us with it.
It was about this issue that Anna Arendt wanted to analyze the problem of people who become mass and who lose their individuality, and she said that it is a problem when people become only producer consumers, and as a consequence, that's how there is a risk of totalitarianism. It's when people do not have political action, and when they become when they only spend their time working in order to produce goods and consuming, they do not really exercise critical thinking and political action.
Well, you know what? I'm trying to go back into my Facebook account and pull up this article that you're referring to. Do you know it off the top of your head, or would you mind pulling it up real quick so we could share it with people who are listening?
I don't. I can send. I don't know. I've read it very quickly, but maybe I will be able to find the link. And but I think it is very interesting in the context of Brave New World and also our current society.
Yes. Well, why don't you take a second to look at that while and send it on as soon as you can find it. I wanted to raise. I was very intrigued by these learning methods that they were employing in the second chapter that we learn of with the hypnopedia and the shock therapy that they're doing with books and nature. And I wanted to ask if you thought we had anything like this unnatural pairing going on within our society today. And I thought that there might be something to this. And I was thinking about it this morning, and it seems like sex is something that gets all mixed up with harmful elements that can cause crazy cognitive dissonance. We see, at least I see it within our culture, in American culture, we get sex and violence are often mixed up in the same movies and music, and in the same breath, I could also say that sex and drugs are often intermixed as well. And these images are really kind of everywhere in America, and I'm kind of unsure that I'm not really sure it's possible to protect children from them. So you have this situation where you don't necessarily have kids in a lab, but the entire system that we participate becomes a way to give these explosive, violent reactions and paired associative memories to the whole population. And I worry, I guess something that I was worried about when thinking about this pairing of sex and violence and sex and drugs is if inevitably this will cause many of us to have pathologies related to something very natural and beautiful, which is sex, that ought to be this like beautiful expression of love between two people and an act of natural procreation. And I just couldn't help but think that there would be all sorts of cognitive dissonance as a result of the messaging that goes within the system that we live in. What do you think about that? Do you see it? The French have a different approach to sex, and I don't mean to steer it towards a topic that is if you don't want to talk about it, but I just got to thinking about like just how ubiquitous it is in American culture and how sickening it is.
No, I think now we live in a globalized culture, so I think there is the same issue in most countries in the world. What you said made me think about a video I've seen on the internet. It's in French, so it was.
That's okay.
Was people who. It was a couple of people who were talking about music, the music which is on air on radio, and how the music has effect on people, and there is and this kind of mental conditioning through music. And they said that the problem is there are very few very little diversity in the music which is on air. And maybe it's less true in America. One of my friends said that radios in your country there is more diversity, but here in France it's very often the same songs and the same kind of music that you hear on radio, and the problem is that the music we hear, the themes, the mainstream music, the one you hear on radio, it's often the same themes, and it's have fun, sex, and violence, and or maybe not violence. Violence is more for movies, but music, mainstream music, it's often the same topics. And they said that it would be better if there would be more diversity, for instance, more peaceful music. Or the problem is yes.
Yeah, so I mean, I can speak to that to some degree as being someone who spent many years of their life working in the music industry in America, and I would say that the answer is a heterogeneous one because it depends on who you are. All the radio stations in America are controlled by the same media companies. So if you do not have a discerning eye or an elevated taste or go beyond what is force-fed to you, you will listen to the same types of songs written by the same handful of people. Even the artists start to look like one another. It seems like right now, like Katy Perry and Miley Cyrus have the same person working on their image. But if you have a more discerning taste, I think that you have college radio stations, you have the internet, and then there's a lot of people who just work in very vibrant musical communities. I was in Athens, Georgia for a long time, and there were so many musical options. But then there's still some themes that transcend all the diverse options, you know. There are a lot of things that people don't sing about. There are a lot of things that people don't compose music about. Even though there might be a multiplicity of stylistic forms, right? It's very hard to find artists that sing about a lot of the things that, you know, we talk about, the more transcendent, spiritual, religious things. And those that do oftentimes get lumped into kind of formulaic commercialized forms of religious music or something like that. So it's a yes and a no. There is more diversity, but I'm not sure it cures all the problems of messaging. And we do have a great deal of problems with sex and violence in the music because there's a great deal of sex and violence in mainstream hip hop music. I love a lot of, when I used to listen to music, I don't even listen to music anymore, which is kind of an issue for me because I'm working on this stuff so much. But there's a lot of positive R&B and hip hop and soul music as well. But a lot of the stuff that's pushed on news can be inherently violent sometimes. I know I sound like Tipper Gore and some right-wing fanatic, but it's just my observation of the world. Did you want to share that article that
yes,
you were able to find the article? Could you tell people about the article?
Yes. So it's Hannah Arendt and Karl Polanyi, Economic Liberalism, the Political Collapse and Mass Society.
Right on. And it's in French, right?
No, it's in English.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. So one of the other things I wanted to talk about, and I think I mentioned a little bit last time, was we're talking about violent paired associate learning. I think I maybe mentioned this about how the Bible is so easily ridiculed as something. I hear a lot of people just saying, oh, well, it's just fairy tales, or it's not a science book, therefore it's not legitimate. And what's very interesting in Brave New World, one of the things that the World Controllers does, Mustafa Mond, is to take Bibles away, and you have to wonder about how Bibles present this stumbling block to this Brave New World system, and how at least I don't know if Huxley. I don't think Huxley was a Christian, but at least I think he thought that there was something about Christianity that allowed people to opt out of the system and to engage in their own forms of flourishing. So even if it wasn't true, he seemed to have respect for it. But it seems like at a very young age where we are that the relationship to the Bible is volatilized, at least in a lot of American consumer society. What do you think about that?
In my country, in France, there is a lot of atheism in French people. Most of people don't believe are in God, and most people don't have a religion, and some of them are Christian but do not practice their religion, and from the most religious people, some say that the most religious people are people who immigrated from other countries.
Are people? See, one of the phenomena that we have in America is that the intellectual ruling class is oftentimes very irreligious and goes after individuals who are religious as being sort of backwards rubes, and openly sort of goes on like a very aggressive marginalization of them. So we have very strident atheists in America. They're not as numerous as the religious people, but they're very aggressive. Does that dynamic manifest itself in France as well, or is it more of a lackadaisical atheism? Is it a more accepting atheism or agnosticism?
No, I don't think it's very. No, I think we have the same issue, and moreover, in French there is something called laïcité, or secular. You can translate as secularism, but the problem is that politicians do not really agree on this notion. It is in law that in France people should respect all religions and do not show too much signs of their religious belonging. So we have to hide a little bit. We are not allowed to show too visible signs of our religion in public services,
Yeah, I feel that way. To be honest, if any, I don't work within a traditional academic setting or anything like that. And oftentimes on Noetic, I make it pretty clear where I stand religiously. I'm not sure if that I were in a contemporary teaching environment, if I could get away with half the things that I say. So I'd have to be much more restrained if I wanted to keep a traditional academic job. And then, but then conversely, if I was working within a traditional religious institution, I say a lot of things that would be an anathema there. So kind of in the intellectual wilderness. I guess that's why I have to build this thing, because I don't really know where I would go. But do you experience something like that where you feel like you have to be muzzled?
Yes, I can't really. It's not easy to talk about this, because most people around me, they do not believe in God, and they think that they say it very honestly that they think it's an illusion. It's like Santa Claus, or and Uh, some
but they don't think it's an illusion that that the Big Bang happened, that we came from nothing.
but some of them also think that religion are the cause of wars in the world, so they think it's something bad.
See, yeah, America doesn't. We don't have necessarily these religious wars that Europe had to deal with. Right? We didn't have the Crusades or whatever, so we don't have this cultural memory infecting our understanding of religion. You know, that gets me thinking. You know, at some point in the future, you know, there was a great. Many people know this in America. I'm not sure what people think about it in France, but do you know this thinker de Tocqueville, who wrote a book, I believe, called Democracy in America, where he had this French. Yeah, Tocqueville. Yeah.
I've learned about him because I had a radio podcast about the tyranny of the majority.
You know, I should listen to some lectures on it. I haven't read it in forever, but I should listen to some lectures on it. Since we do have this French-American dynamic and we're talking about Brave New World, it might be interesting to bring some of his thoughts into the conversation. So I'll have to make a mental note of that to explore some of his writings and see how they bear on this. We should probably move on a little bit. I mean, the other thing I was going to say about this, how Christianity and Brave New World, and I guess our world as well, seems marginalized. One of the things that they do in Brave New World is that they try to eradicate all cultural memory of Christ, and they even turn the cross into a symbol for Henry Ford. And so the old meaning has been lost, and a possibility for humans is gone. And like I was saying earlier, it seems like Huxley bemoans the loss of Christianity, not necessarily from he's concerned about eternal destinations, but just the existentialist point of view about what it could mean for the here and now. One of the third things I thought was kind of interesting was trying to separate sexuality from human reproduction, because the people in Brave New World have sex like crazy. Like, they're always trying to have sex, but they're sickened by the idea of reproduction, and one can only wonder why they're sickened by the idea of human reproduction. I mean, what we know about genetics, right, is that when people come together by chance, they produce, unexpected offspring. And if you have unexpected offspring, then it's harder to create this pyramid scheme that would allow for top-down world controllers to manipulate the stratification. So they have to make people sick of human reproduction, and they ban words like mother, and they make the whole process of human reproduction something that is repulsive. And I wanted to ask you, Sophie, is like, in our global society, do we see something like that? Specifically, are we seeing the breakdown of the family unit? Are we seeing reproduction as gross? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think so. I think some people are afraid that it will be the case now that, for instance, people from the same sex are allowed to marry and to adopt children, but some are. But I don't think it is so much occurring right now. I think at least in France, there is still a very traditional model of family, and most people, I would say, it's quite the opposite. Most people I know, it's like as if they are conditioned to find someone and to be in a relationship and to have 2 children, and they kind of feel compelled to follow this societal model.
But I hear stories over here in America that the birth rate is like really bad in Europe, that it's not replacing itself enough. Is that true?
Not in France, but in Germany, I think so. But in France,
okay.
There have been policies in order to encourage people to have children. So there are around 2 children per between 1 or 2 children per nearly 2 children per couple, I think.
So you are getting a replacement rate. I kind of.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
The natality is quite high in France compared to other European countries.
And do you think that's just because of the political incentives, or is there something else going on within?
I think there is political help and incentives, and also maybe it's a social convention, or I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say about this particular issue, like in America right now, we're having a lot of issues with how we identify ourselves. So there's a great deal of debate. I don't really concern myself with any of it, but there's a great big debate about, I identify as this, identify as that, and so there might be somewhat of a concern that, words like mother and father become completely outdated and antiquated as we have this debate going on within American society. But I don't see the reproduction being viewed as gross or disgusting within American culture. In fact, it seems like a lot of these new arrangements of the family, where individuals are desperately seeking to have natural birth, right, and turning to science to do the impossible. We do have people who have changed genders, having children, or seeking out, help from science to do this. And to be honest, I kind of wish that people would adopt more, to be honest. I mean, we have all these, we have all these children in foster homes that need parents. I kind of wish that people would think about that a little bit more rather than turning to innovations in science. But I guess the desire to I don't understand it personally. I have no children. I've never had a child. I don't really understand the desire to have something that has to be biologically yours when there are just so many children out there seeking a stable home, So I'm a big fan of adoption. I wish more people thought about it. I don't really care if you were I don't really have an opinion about what your family unit looks like, as long as you'd be willing to help a kid out.
Yes. Some people are afraid about these new trends of reproduction, and especially in France, it's not authorized to. How do you call it in English?
Are you talking about like designer babies? Is that what?
No. Yes, it's not authorized in France, and also, for instance, for a couple of two men, when they want to have children, they can ask a woman to bear their baby.
Right.
And
it's not surrogate.
Authorized in France, and the problem is that sometimes they go to foreign countries in order to have a baby, and when they come back in France, the child is not considered as their child. And people there are even feminists. There is a division between feminists, because some of them say that women shouldn't sell their body, and it's it's marketing of the body of a woman.
So yeah, it's like this choice between the commodification of woman in that respect, if she becomes a surrogate, and her free choice to use that as a means for earning an income.
Yes, but it's a problem, because it's a kind of maybe there are um, some people, and I think the same. I think something maybe shouldn't be sold, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that raises very interesting questions about where we draw the line, right?
Yes.
And what we're going to be using to draw that line, right? Because I think if you just are relying on reason alone, you know, I mean, if you're relying on reason, I mean, this is getting way off topic, and I don't, but I mean, but if you're relying on reason alone, you know, I mean, how do you make the case that, you know, that prostitution should be illegal? You know, I mean, how do you deny a person of that free choice to make a living with their air quotes labor? You know, I'm not sure reason alone can draw that boundary for someone else.
And you know, the problem is, and it's interesting when you think about Karl his name, Karl Polanyi, because he talked about the fact that some things shouldn't be in the market, and the three things which he thought about was the land, so nature, and work, and the currency. And it's funny because sometimes I think that in our capitalist society, we are kind of prostitutes when we work, because we sell our mental energy, our intelligence to a company in order for it to make profit. So it's a kind of prostitution of the intelligence of and of our emotional and energy, and our time.
I completely agree, and I especially see this within the American university system. So you have all these like brilliant people who've earned their PhDs, and they can't get tenure track jobs, and they the universities realize that there's more, they can be more cost effective if they hire adjuncts on temporary bases, and you have people who've dedicated their lives who are essentially, I mean, they're just not fairly compensated, while people at the top make a ton of money, or people who run athletic programs make a ton of money, and there's just kind of this people. It's these really brilliant people fighting over the scraps, and I don't know. I think there's something unsustainable about it, and we're going to need new ways of envisioning how we learn. Fortuitously, we have the internet and we have all the books available to ourselves. I think we have to be self-educators. We have to develop new forms of economic sustenance. So that's like kind of what I'm trying to do here.
But the problem is most people don't have time to learn, and Nietzsche, the philosopher, he wrote about this as well. I have a quotation from him.
Please share it.
But it's in French, so I have to find it in English. When he talked about work.
How about I find it? I'll find it in English. Where's it from?
I have to search for it. It's when he talked about how work take our mental energy out of us, so we can't have critical thinking, and so I'm searching for it because.
Well, it's interesting. It's a mechanism that's been used forever and ever. Someone once told me that, and this is hearsay, so I can't really substantiate it. But someone once told me one of the reasons why Hitler would give so many of his speeches at night is that the workers were so exhausted from the day, it was harder for them to develop intellectual dissent during his rallies, and so they found themselves swept up in his rhetoric. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. I can't really substantiate it, but that might have been one of the mind control tactics of Goebbels and Hitler.
Yes, I'm just. I have the quotation in the.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and just go ahead and read it in French and then kind of tell us what it says or what you think it says.
I found the where it is. It is in Aurore, so it's the. I don't know how it is translated. The book or book 3, a paragraph. Well, maybe I can find it in English. I have the book, the name of the book, the chapter. So maybe I can find it.
Well, just read it and I'll figure it. I'm pretty familiar with Nietzsche's thoughts, so I might be able to figure it out. So go ahead and read it in French and tell me what you think it says.
It's about glorification of work. So I'm going to translate what it means in French. In glorification of work, in discourses about benediction of work, I see the same thought that when you glorify impersonal acts which are useful to everyone, there is a fear of everything which is individual. In fact, we feel today when we see work, we see hard work from morning to evening, and that work is the best of police. Work is the best of policies, because it makes everyone act. How can I translate it in English? It makes everyone it's an
That's okay.
hold together, and it prevents development of reason, desires, and taste of independence. It consumes an extraordinary huge quantity of nervous strength, and remove it from reflection, meditation, dreaming, concerns, love, and hate, and it presents itself in a very shabby goal, and assure easy and regular satisfactions. So in a society when we work hard constantly, we will have more security, and we love security as a god, as a supreme god. And how awful the worker became dangerous. The world is full of dangerous individuals, and the danger of dangers is the individual. So it's really related to Brave New World. So I'm searching for the name of the book in English, but I think in the context of Brave New World, it's really it's like a summary of the book, of this kind of society.
Well, it's okay. Yeah. I agree. What's so interesting is that people like Hitler would co-opt Nietzsche to go about justifying this machine-like society.
But Nietzsche didn't want to justify it. It really was a critique when you read this paragraph.
Yeah, totally. I there's no way that Nietzsche would have been down for Nazism.
His concept of Überman was used by Nazis.
Yeah.
So it's the chapter. Oh yes, I found the quote in English.
Do you want to read it in its entirety?
Yes. So it's from Aurore. Okay. Those who commend work, In the glorification of work, in the unwearied talk of the blessing of work, I see the same converged idea as in the praise of useful impersonal actions, that of fear of everything individual. Fundamentally, one now feels at the sight of work, one always means by work that hard industriousness from early till late, that such work is the best policeman, that it keeps everyone in bounds and can mightily hinder the development of reason, covetousness, desire for independence, for it uses up an extraordinary amount of nervous energy, which is thus denied to reflection, brooding, dreaming, worrying, loving, hating. It sets a small goal always in sight and guarantees easy and regular satisfactions. Thus, a society in which there is continual hard work will have more security, and security is now worshipped as the supreme divinity. And now, horror! Precisely the worker has become dangerous. The place is swarming with dangerous individuals, and behind them the danger of dangers, the individual.
Oh man, that's good. That's good stuff. That's good stuff.
So that's why people like Bernard and John are dangerous individuals in this Brave New World society.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, I could go on about that quote forever. But let's move on to chapter 3. So in chapter 3 of Brave New World, we see the next leg of the tour, and the DHC shows children playing sexual games and tells the tour group, to their shock, that this seemed abnormal before the time of Ford. And Mustafa Mond is introduced, one of the 10 world controllers, the resident controller for Western Europe. So he would be your controller, Sophie. And he is one of the enlightened dictators who understands the old and the new world. And Mond tells us about anthrax bombs and the 9-Year War, and that the world system was chosen to avoid destruction. And we're also told about how Soma, we'll be talking about a lot about Soma here, brought an end to worry, and stability proved to be the keystone to social control. So, lots of things to talk about here. I want to talk about first, what is, this revealing to the tour group of these children playing sexual games, and that there could have been a time where children didn't play sexual games. Like, what is that? What does that even mean? It seems like these future people have no conception of innocence and sexual purity. It seems like innocence is something stripped away from them immediately. Aside from this, you see what I'm saying? Like it doesn't. It's like totally shocking to them that something could exist in the world that didn't contribute to the world system. That there could be something pure and true that hadn't been totally manipulated in a way.
You know what? The thought it gave me is that these people, you think they lost their innocence, but in fact, it seems that they remain children all their life. That's the impression that I got when I read this, is that people never become adults. Even if they have sex from a very young age, in their mind they have so little individuality that it's like they remain children in their heads.
Yeah, they're kind of, there are stages between children and adulthood. I mean, maybe it's better to say that these people that live in this era of Brave New World are just emotionally arrested teenagers.
Yes.
Right? Because and we'll talk about this in regards to the Soma and everything else that's going on within this world system control, is that there might be certain factors in place that prevent them from becoming fully individual and becoming fully adult. So, I don't know. I mean, maybe this tour group is analogous to a bunch of 13-year-olds or 17-year-olds or something like that, where they just can't imagine something not sexualized. And
Yes, I think it's the topic of this book. I think there is a general reflection in this book, and I think what it tries to explain is the problem of individual development. I think and how society can prevent individual development in order to impose a tyrannic system.
Yeah, yeah. Because if you can keep people perpetually 17 years old, right? I mean, how much easier is it to control that than fully developed adults, right? Like I look, I'm slaughtering a lot of sacred cows and talking about this, right? But like, you know, any there's a reason why the military is primarily made up of people who are 17, 18, 19, 20 years old or whatever. It's those people can be molded, can be shaped, and they can be turned. I'm not trying to make this like critique on like the military or anything like that. Like I don't want to be like this anti-patriotic person, but I mean the military itself, I think if you were to ask high-ranking people, that it's like very important to get people at this age in order to turn them into implements of war. It's easier to control someone. It would be hard. It would be. I don't think you and I would make good soldiers.
And it makes me think again about. I haven't read the book yet, but I've heard several videos about this book, the Discourse on Voluntary Servitude by de la Boétie, and I should read it. I've bought the book, but I didn't have time to read it, and they talk about how. The tyrants use distraction in order to keep people in servitude.
Bread and circuses. It's as old as the Romans, right? And in America, oh my God, we have so many distractions here. Like people know, and I've been one of these people. People know more about the cornerback for the Washington Redskins, like a component of a football team in my area, than they do about, I don't know, the trajectory of history, right? What's really amazing to me is like when I like listen to like talk radio about like our local sports team or something like that, like the average person can call in and with like Rain Man like precision and accuracy recall all the statistics of a football player. But if I was to say, hey, those pyramids in Egypt, pretty weird. Have you ever thought about those pyramids? Crickets. And if you even ask the question about the pyramids in Egypt or whatever,
I
the question
watched a documentary about pyramids recently.
That great pyramid of Giza, Sophie. There's something going on there. I'll talk to you. I don't have conclusive conclusions yet, but I know. I see your face.
The documentary I watched was about history and the traditions of ancient Egyptians.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm not ready to make any claims, but there's more than meets the eye, I think. But you know what I'm saying? Let's go back to the whole thing. Distractions,
yes.
Right? Do you have this in France?
Yes, I think
it's like for us, it's Super Bowl, World Series, Rihanna. We have all these distractions. So
the way this tyranny is exerted is through distraction, work, and in Brave New World there is people are conditioned before birth, but today we are conditioned by these two things, and they prevent distractions and work, prevent individual development and development of critical thinking, and so people cannot contest the system.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been there. I've been one of the people that bought into it, and I find myself awakening and getting out of it. I guess the question is like, is it possible that you and I could still be deceived into being part of it? You know, I don't want to set ourselves up as people who, haha, we are these enlightened beings that have been able to get away from the distractions and see the true nature of reality, right?
Yes, I think we have our limitations, so we cannot know we will never know everything. So we will always be. We will have our physical limitation. We cannot understand everything. We cannot learn everything. So we have cognitive biases and everything. So we will never know the truth. But the more we try we try to have time for ourselves, and I think it's important to have time out which is not used in distraction and work, just time for like Nietzsche said, for meditation or just for learning things. But I think it's really important to have this time.
Yeah, he did a lot of hiking in the Alps. That's what he did.
Mm.
Yeah. He also, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Nietzsche composed music. Mm. He wrote classical music. He wrote some chamber music. When I listened to music, I actually thought it was pretty good, but a lot of people say it's bad. But I was like, man, better than anything I could do.
I think even Socrates wrote a song before he died.
Did he really?
I think I watched a documentary about Socrates' life, and before he died, he was writing a song, and one of his disciples said to him, "Why are you writing a song? Because you are going you are going to drink your poison because he was condemned to death sentence." But he was writing a song just before he was dying. Because the God told him to write a song.
and he also prays at the end of his life too. But that's like for another something about there's something he makes a prayer at the end of his life. Well, I'll have to look into that. I seem to have a faint memory of it. I got to look into that. But so a big question that I wanted to ask you, Sophie, is, maybe we're being too hard on the world state, looking at it from Mustafa Ahmad's point of view, could there be a situation where the world state is justifiable? It's all about consumption, the family no longer existing, all needs are met, all obstacles to happiness are taken care of. But what kind of life can we really have if there's no... I guess what I'm trying to say here is he's talking about the anthrax and the 9 Years' War and stuff like that, and he's like, look, it's kind of... I can understand why you would think that it would be like this passionless mechanism, but that provides stability to everyone. And we don't really have a society where people are actualizing, but like they have soma and all their worrying is taken away and they have sex all the time and everybody is productive. Like that's so much better than the old world where we have this war all the time. And it's going back to something I mentioned earlier about how far, if we just let reason alone guide us, it becomes this coin toss, because you can see it from the world controller's point of view about why this is better for humanity if you're just consulting reason. Because I can make the case for it either way. And the only reason, I think one of the big reasons, and I'm going to shut up after I say this because I want to include 2 quotes from the Bible. I think a big part of the motivation for me to resist anything that is like Brave New World or the New World Order, are passages like this from the Bible, which is prohibited in the Brave New World, like Ephesians 6:12. It says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places," authoritarian control. And Psalm 2:1-12. "Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, Let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord holds them in derision. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury." So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, like, from a purely rational point of view, I can see both perspectives here. I can entertain both ideas, but I would say that it is my Christian faith that makes me very, very skeptical about 10 world controllers taking care of everything. Not even to mention this Antichrist figure that comes out of the Bible. Okay, I'll shut up now.
I have something I have something to say about this, because this is a topic which is very important to me. And I think it's a problem of our society, is we forgot the meaning of suffering, and it's the importance of emotional suffering in individual development. And I think we have the same problem as in Brave New World, is that we are in a hedonist society in which pleasure is so important, and people think of depression and emotional pain and anxiety as something negative, completely negative. Whereas I don't think the same, and there are several psychiatrists and psychologists who said that maybe sometimes very difficult emotional experiences are important for individual development, and it is something which is so sad that it is not right. It is not an idea which is widespread in the world. This importance of I think people do not realize that the importance of becoming of actually, like you say, there is maybe people, it would talk the importance of personality development. I think it's something which and spiritual and emotional and development, and I think it's something which is neglected.
Suppressed. Totally suppressed. Yeah.
And it is a topic which is very important to me, because all my life it's been the fight of my life. Is to be able to develop in this world in which everyone is preventing me from it. There is so much social pressure. People want you to remain where you are, and they want you to be a part of the to be like everyone else, and they do not want you to develop and to become yourself.
Well, I'm so glad you fought it, because I can see how, as one person who struggled to become an individual to another, I can see how hard you've worked to become yourself. And I think that's an interesting question in the context of the whether or not we ought to opt for the world system or to become left more uncontrolled. Right? Is it rationally justifiable to allow human beings to be left alone on their own so that they can go through this struggle process. And, Mustafa Mond would say, well, if you do that, you're going to get cataclysmic war, because the struggle is going to, it's individuals exist within societies, and they're going to interact with each other in such a way that you're going to end up with chaos.
In the article I sent to you about Hannah Arendt and Karl Polanyi, they talk about this specific subject, and that's why I think it's interesting. Is that I know it's not in this one; it's in another article I sent to you, and it's about in a website in French, Spirituality and Philosophy, and there is a particular article about it was extremely interesting, and about this specific subject, and they said that. We have this. Yes, I don't have it right now. Yes, it's about wisdom and revolt, and I don't know if it's revolt in English, but and rebellion, wisdom and rebellion, and they said that the apparent order that there is in the world is an illusion, and it is chaos. Actually, we think that if people became individual, developed critical thinking, that there would be more chaos, but it's not true, because what we think is order right now, it's actually chaos, and we do not see it.
Right. Well, Sophie, that's I don't know if you're allowed to think that thought. That might put you on the fringes and the margins if you were to entertain such an idea. But
yes,
I'm okay with that. I like people who think on the fringes.
And that's why I talked to you about the book of Albert Camus, The Rebel.
The Rebel.
Because it was in this article as well. They talked about this book. And this article it's in France, but and there is also a paragraph about Brave New World, and
is there?
It's really on topic with all that we are talking about right now.
Well, you can read it and then just kind of tell us what you think it means. Don't translate it. Just read it in French and then
it's
very
long. So maybe I can I can do a summary in English of this article.
Yeah, sure. What's the article called again?
About wisdom and rebellion, and in the introduction, they talk about an exam philosophy subject. Patience makes people live, but wisdom makes them last. And they talk about how wisdom can be revolutionary. Can lead to revolution, wisdom. And so the first paragraph is about easy little happiness, easy small happiness, and unuseful rebellion. And there is a picture of Brave New World in the first paragraph. And they talk about how there is no more authentic rebellion, that French rebellion was the last real rebellion, and after this there has been democracies in was the next step of history, and and consumption society sell the comfortable happiness accessible to everyone, and that the last man, as said Francis Fukuyama, only has his only goal is to how do you say it in English? The only goal of man now is to seize the day. And rebellion became useful and strange. And when we win happiness, we can let ourselves be apathic, and society is stable. And so Huxley in Brave New World say to that we cannot make tragedy without social instability. So it's in the last chapters of Brave New World. World is stable now, people are happy, they get what they want and never want what they cannot get. They are at ease in security, and they cannot behave as if they cannot help but behave as they should. And so yes, and the character said that stability in show being satisfied does not is not as magical as a good fight against unhappiness, and is not as picturesque as a fight against temptation and a defeat against passion and doubt. Happiness is not grandiose. It's not, and so they said that Huxley book was visionary because there is because this scenario is realized now, and
you know what? You'll have to send me the link for this as well, so I can put it in like the description box on YouTube or elsewhere.
I am going to post it, but it's in French, this one, and
that's fine. I imagine that there are some French listeners to this right now, and that people can plug it into the translate function on Google if they want to get a flavor for it.
So yes, and they said that now the new totalitarian regimes will not need violent methods to control people. That only they can use persuasion through divertisement and advertisement, and this the fact that people's only goal become to seize the day, and this happiness, this easy life is the only goal of people, and so people who want so the risk that people will not want to be excluded from the system because they wouldn't have this condition necessary to their happiness. So the result is mass like they said in the article, mass society, and Hannah Arendt also talked about this concept of mass society, and people become sheeps, and and they renounce to rebellion. They do not want to rebel anymore. The article and the second part of the article is about Camus the rebel, and the notion of how this notion of rebellion, which is not the same as revolution, and he explains that this, because the revolutionary is someone who become oppressor. So it's very interesting to learn about this, how someone can become a rebel. This concept, this difference between rebellion and revolution.
I think it's very important, right? Because I mean, you saw in your own country the very complicated nature that happened when people revolted, right? It ultimately led to Napoleon, so and in the Reign of Terror as well. So we have to be very careful about what authentic rebellion and revolution looks like. But that is for another day. I'm not trying to be hard on the French, because Americans have their own problems. But it'd be interesting one day to pick up how exactly the French consciousness wrestles with this idea of, they were, putting the goddess of reason on the throne, and then it ultimately ended up with, a Napoleonic dictator. So, And
I think the answer to this is in this discourse on voluntary servitude is in order to be free, in order to end a tyrannic regime, the best solution is not revolution, it's not a violent revolution. The best solution is just stopping to serve the tyrant.
Yeah. There's this movie that was popular in America when I was a kid, I believe, called War Games. And I think I may have even sent it to you, where they had like this supercomputer who was like playing out all these different scenarios of a nuclear exchange between America and Russia, and he like melts down and he's like, the only winning move is to not play the game, or something to that effect.
Yes, and I think it's really what is explained in this book of La Boétie. And I think there is and it also maybe in the Camus book, but I haven't read it yet. But I think it's this concept of rebellion, which is not violent revolution, but more an internal revolution.
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about internal revolutions, of course, I'm going to use that as an opportunity to talk about to be born again as a Christian. But that's what I would recommend, an ultimate way to unplug from the system. We've been going at this for about over an hour, but there was one more thing I wanted. It looks like we're only going to get through, chapter 3 today, but that's okay. That's okay. You know what? I mean, if people want like the 10-minute version of Brave New World, they've got that. So they can have that. I want to talk a little bit more about Soma and the analog that we have with Soma, and how Bernard resists taking the Soma because it makes him feel like an inauthentic human being. And this opens up a whole can of worms about proliferation of antidepressants in the pharmaceutical industry. Also, just things like, I don't know. I mean, I think France has had to deal with this obviously as well. In America, especially like where I live, like, man, alcoholism is like totally being normalized here. Like, just in a short period of time, like I talk to people, I'm like, so what you doing this weekend? They're like, going to the winery. And I'm like, and they're like, yeah, I'm just going to go to the winery all weekend. And I'm just going to be like, you're pretty much going to be drunk for 36 straight hours, 48 hours. So what I'm trying to say here is, and also, I'm not perfect. I'm no stranger to big pharma. I mean, in my 20s, when I was, wrestling with a lot of this desire to become an individual and enduring the labor pangs of being an individual, I have, I'm not going to make this a secret. I have taken several antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications, and I will say that that delayed my development as an adult. Now, there was a period in my life when I was in an episode of crisis where I felt like it helped me manage where I was. But in retrospect, I see it became a crutch for me personally. And I'm now in a place where this is the least amount of medication I've ever taken in my life, and I feel amazing. And the reason why, if I were to look at why I feel so amazing, even though I'm super busy and sleep deprived and all this other stuff, I was like, I really enjoy my work. And my religious life has gotten like super awesome. So, I have meaningful work and I have a meaningful relationship with God. And the more that those things develop, the less I'm finding the need to take any sort of drug. And I feel a little bit like I've always identified with R.P. McMurphy's character in this book or this movie called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, who just refuses to take his medication. I feel like that guy now. He's kind of hiding the pill underneath his tongue. So,
yes,
but it seems like we have the soma already in our society.
I agree with that, and I think people take this medication in order to adapt to society as it is, and if they didn't take it, they would start a revolution. And I've seen this. I've seen this in a discussion in a Hannah Arendt discussion group, and someone said an article about medication and revolution, and they said if alcohol was forbidden in France, we would have a second French Revolution.
That's hysterical. So in France, do you see a lot of people just drinking themselves into compliance of the system? Do you see that happening there?
Yes, I think so. Not everyone, but yes, I think alcohol is used as a...
Yeah, do you guys have the same problem that we have with drugs? Or is it?
Yes.
Because just drugs are crazy here.
And I haven't seen drug in my life, but most people did, and there are a lot of people who are addicted to drugs and teenagers who have money problems because as drug is illegal, they have to steal money in order to buy drugs and.
The issue we're having here is like there's a ton of drug use amongst the very elite too. It's not just the poor people. It's it seems to have affected every aspect of society.
I think it's a sign that society that our current society is ill.
Yeah. I hear. But the interesting thing is, Sophie, do you know how many people think we're ill for saying that? Do you know how many people I know you do, but do you know how many people think we're crazy for saying like dial out of the system, dial out of the drugs, dial out of the drinking, dial into your religiousness? Do you know how many people think we're crazy for saying that?
Oh, I know. Or most people I know would think that. Yes.
So you and I are total nut jobs.
Yes, but there are people like us everywhere.
Yeah, but is it?
We have to create a network.
Well, that's kind of what we're doing, right?
Yes.
That's kind of what we're doing. Hopefully we'll have a physical correlate where we can meet one day. I'm kind of been thinking about that. So, but yeah. All right. Well, hey, do you want to say anything else before I bring this session to a close? Because I've got to get ready for my lesson with Jennifer on Pride and Prejudice, and I've kind of gotten out of my system everything I wanted to say, and I just want to say thank you so much for doing this with me. I mean, I love hearing your perspective, and I'm sure many other people do as well.
Yes, I just wanted to know because we are talking more about the whole book than the chapters we are supposed to talk about, and and so now where are we in the book?
I think we. I think we finished chapter 3,
and we started chapter 4 because we started to talk about Bernard. And the Bernard, who is an outcast in this society, and I really loved reading about Bernard's thoughts because it really reminded me how I felt when I was a child. My experience because I've been rejected by other children, and I could relate so much to what he was thinking. And I think everyone who is rejected by peers has this kind of thoughts. And I really loved reading about his experience.
Right, Bernard's a very interesting character, right? Because he is an alpha plus in this stratified society, right? So he does occupy the upper echelon, but he believes that there was something that went wrong in the decanting process that made him. Do I have this right? He's shorter than everyone else. Is that right?
He's shorter than people who from his class. Yes.
Yeah, and so he feels incongruous with his class and feels like an outsider, and it's like that physical limitation that doesn't allow him to participate in the system fully. So it makes him feel dissatisfied with the script that everybody else is going along with. I can kind of relate to him too because I was a very heavy set little boy. I was pretty rotund as a little boy, and I was mocked and ostracized for my weight as a child, and I eventually grew out of it. But I remember thinking about the ridicule that I suffered as a child, and maybe even reflecting back on it, how that made me a very unusual person as an adult too, because I was physically disgusting. Like, I had to develop other aspects of myself. I had to try to be funny, to get people to laugh, or try to be smart, to compensate. And I think about how much that stayed with me. I don't, it's a pretty silly story, but yeah, I think it's interesting to think about how like a quote unquote defect can actually be this great thing that leads to our individuality as adults.
I agree with that so much. And it's one of the very important themes of my life, I think.
Well, I don't think anything's wrong with you.
Thank you.
If we were in elementary school together, we would have been friends.
I hope so.
we would have hung out on the monkey bars or the seesaw. You would have been my seesaw friend. All right. Well, I've got we'll pick it up there next week. Yeah, if you were my seesaw friend, I don't know if I was so heavy, you probably wouldn't have been able to get the seesaw to go the other way. Maybe we would have been
seesaw. I don't know what it is.
You have the seesaw. It's the it's like.
I love seesaw. Oh.
What do you call the seesaw in France?
It's a balançoire.
Balançoire? Yeah, I think you would have been too little and I would have been too big for the seesaw. But maybe the swings. Maybe we would have been friends on the swings.
Swings.
Okay. Anywho. But anyway.
Yes, it was balançoire is swings. And seesaw is bascule. Okay.
best you.
I love swings.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll put the live stream up, and I'll have the more professional audio version up probably later tonight. And just send me your files, Sophie. And I just want to thank everyone for listening and going on this ride with us through Brave New World. I'm getting a lot out of this. I hope everybody else is. I hope you are, Sophie. Yeah. And we'll talk soon about when we'll set up our third installment. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.